The call came at 2:14 in the morning. Not a ringtone. Not a knock at the door. A scream. My daughter's voice, Claire's voice, cutting through the August heat like something I hadn't heard in 30 years of my life. Not since a warehouse on Decatur Street collapsed around 3 of my men, and I had to go back in twice to find them. That kind of scream doesn't live in your throat. It comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere a human being only reaches when the thing they love most is slipping away from them in real time, and there is nothing they can do about it on their own. I was already half out of bed before I was fully awake. My phone was on the nightstand. I grabbed it, and the screen showed her name. I answered, and I said, "Claire." And she said, "Dad, the house. Dad, there's smoke everywhere. I can't find. Marcus is trying to get to the second floor, but the staircase, Dad, please." And then the line cut. I stood in my bedroom in Collinsville, Illinois, in the dark, in a white undershirt and pajama pants, barefoot on the hardwood floor my wife and I had installed together in 2003, and I did not feel fear. Fear is something that happens to you when you're young. When you're 63 and you've walked into burning structures 41 times over a career that lasted 2 decades, what fear becomes is something else entirely, something quieter, a cold current moving up through the center of your chest, pulling everything inside you into focus, the way a lens adjusts until a blurry image becomes precise and sharp and completely still. I was in my truck in under 2 minutes. I called 911 from the driveway. I told them the address, 1418 Birchwood Drive, Maplewood, and I told them the structure was a 2-story single-family home, approximately 2,400 square feet, and that there were at least 2 adults and 1 child inside. The dispatcher started asking me to confirm my name, and I said, "I'm on my way there right now. Send everything you have." I didn't wait for her to finish. The drive was 11 minutes. I know, because I have driven it hundreds of times in the 4 years since Claire moved into that house with her husband, Derek, and their daughter, Lily, who was 3 years old that August night, 3 years old and sleeping on the second floor, and the staircase. Claire had said something about the staircase. I drove with both hands on the wheel of my Ford F-150, and I kept my breathing even, and I thought about what I knew. Wood frame construction. 2 bedrooms upstairs, master and Lily's room. The master was at the back. Lily's room faced the street. I knew this because I had painted that room with Claire 2 summers ago. Pale yellow. She wanted something that felt like sunlight even on cloudy days. I am getting ahead of myself. That is what happens when you tell a story like this. You rush toward the part that matters most, the part that is still living inside you like an ember that never quite goes out. But for you to understand what happened on Birchwood Drive at 2:14 in the morning and what it meant, not just to me, not just to Claire and Lily, but to Derek, my son-in-law, a man who for 4 years had looked at me and seen approximately nothing. You have to know where all of us came from first. And before I get into any of that, I want to say something to you directly, whoever you are, watching this right now at whatever hour of day or night you found me. If you have ever stood in the dark, holding a phone that just went silent, and felt that cold particular knowledge that someone you love is in danger and you are the only one close enough to do something about it, then this story is yours as much as it is mine. Stay with me until the end. It matters. And if something in these first few seconds has already found its way into your chest, please leave a like on this video, leave me a comment below, tell me your own story, because I promise you I read every single one. And subscribe to this channel, because stories like this one, quiet stories about the things families go through behind closed doors, deserve to be told out loud. They deserve to be heard. Now, let me start at the beginning. My name is Robert Callahan. People who know me call me Bobby, though I've never loved that name and never quite understood how it stuck. I'm 63 years old. I was born in Belleville, Illinois, the second of 4 children raised by a pipe fitter and a school secretary who worked every hour God gave them and still found time, somehow, to fill a house with noise and cooking smells and the kind of arguments that never felt dangerous because, even when they were loud, you always knew they'd end with someone laughing. My father taught me that quiet men were not weak men. He taught me that by example, mostly. He never had to say it out loud. I joined the Maplewood Fire Department at 22 years old, and I worked there for 21 years. Retiring at 43 after a back injury that the department doctor said made it irresponsible for me to continue active duty in structural firefighting. I didn't love that word, irresponsible, but I understood it. Bodies keep score. Mine had kept score since a collapse in 1999 that rearranged 3 of my lumbar vertebrae in ways that still make themselves known every morning when I get up off a mattress. I ended my career as a captain. I don't say that to impress anyone. I say it because it explains certain things, certain habits of mind, certain ways of moving through a crisis, that become relevant later. After retiring from the department, I worked for a landscaping company for a few years, then started my own small operation. Lawn maintenance, hedge trimming, seasonal cleanups. It wasn't glamorous, but I was good at it, and it kept me physical, which mattered. My wife, Sandra, had died in 2015. Breast cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. And after she was gone, the work became something more than a business. It became the reason to get up in the morning, the routine of it, the simple satisfaction of making something look cared for. I live alone now, in the house Sandra and I shared for 22 years, on Maple Court in Collinsville, about 11 minutes from Birchwood Drive. I have a dog named Hank, a 9-year-old beagle mix who snores and hogs the foot of the bed and is the best company I have found in the years since Sandra left this world. I volunteer on Tuesday evenings at the St. Augustine Food Pantry, a fact about my life that I mentioned because it was at that pantry, one Tuesday in October 4 years before all of this, that I first met Derek Nolan. He came in with Claire. They had been dating for about 8 months at that point, and she wanted to introduce him to me somewhere she felt comfortable, somewhere that would show him who her father was. That detail matters. My daughter knew me well enough to understand that I don't perform well at restaurants or at structured social events. She knew I was most myself when I was doing something useful with my hands. So she brought him to the pantry and we sorted canned goods together for 2 hours. And I tried to like him. I genuinely tried. He was 31 at the time. Tall, good-looking, the kind of man who takes up space in a room without seeming to be aware of it. He worked in commercial real estate, which he explained to me at length and with considerable enthusiasm. He had broad shoulders and an easy smile, and I could see immediately why Claire had fallen for him. He was the kind of man who makes women feel chosen, who makes the choosing feel like something special, like he could have had anyone and he picked you. I had seen that type before. I had been married to Sandra for 22 years, and I knew that the men who made women feel the most chosen in the beginning were sometimes the men who made them feel the most small, later, when the choosing stopped feeling like enough. But that was a suspicion, not a fact, and I am not a man who acts on suspicions. So I shook Derek's hand and I said, "It's good to meet you," and I meant it as much as I could. Claire was 30 at the time. She is my only child. Sandra and I tried for a second, and the pregnancy didn't survive the first trimester, and after that Sandra's body made clear it was done with that particular conversation. So it was always just Claire, which meant the love we had for her was concentrated in a way that it might not have been otherwise. She was a physical therapist, working at a rehabilitation center in Maplewood. She was careful and thoughtful, and she laughed easily, and she had Sandra's eyes, that particular shade of gray-green that always made me think of Lake Michigan in autumn. She had Sandra's stubbornness too, which I always considered a gift even when it made my life more complicated. She had inherited something from me as well, though it took me years to name it. A tendency toward quiet, a preference for solving problems alone before asking for help. In a firefighter, that instinct will get you killed. You learn to suppress it, or you don't last. In Claire, I watched it take a different shape, a habit of minimizing her own distress, of smoothing things over, of finding reasons to believe that what she was feeling was an overreaction. It was the quality in her that made her a patient and non-judgmental therapist. It was also the quality that allowed her, for longer than any of us should have let it go on, to minimize what was happening inside her marriage to Derek Nolan. I first noticed something specific at Thanksgiving, 2 years after they married. We were at their house, me, Claire's Aunt Patricia, and 2 of Derek's friends from college, a couple named Josh and Nicole, who were pleasant in the way that people are pleasant when they are entirely committed to not noticing anything uncomfortable. Dinner was good. Claire had cooked most of it herself. The turkey was perfect. The gravy was perfect. The kitchen smelled the way kitchens should smell on that particular Thursday in November, like warmth made edible. Derek opened a second bottle of wine around 7 o'clock. He was in a good mood. He was telling a story about a deal he'd closed that week, gesturing with the bottle as he talked, and Claire was clearing plates from the table, moving around the edge of the room quietly. She reached past him to take his plate, and he said, without looking at her, without interrupting the story, "Careful, babe, you're hovering." And Josh and Nicole laughed, and Patricia laughed, and I watched Claire's shoulders do something very small and very specific. They didn't tense, they dropped. Just half an inch, the way shoulders drop when something lands on them from above and presses them down. She laughed too. She said, "Sorry," and went back to the kitchen. I kept eating. I replayed that half inch in my mind for the rest of the evening. Christmas that same year, Derek corrected Claire twice at the dinner table, in front of me and Patricia, about a story she was telling about a patient at the rehabilitation center. He didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice in public, I came to understand. He was far too careful for that. He corrected her the way you correct a child who is telling a story wrong, with a small, patient sigh and a, "That's not quite how it happened, babe." That made Claire stop mid-sentence and look down at her plate and say, very quietly, "You're right, I got it mixed up." She hadn't gotten it mixed up. I had heard the story before. She was telling it correctly. Easter the following spring, a family dinner with Derek's parents, his mother Carol and his father Garrett. Derek was drinking. He had been drinking since noon. He was charming and loud in the way that certain drunk people are charming and loud, expansive, apparently benevolent, filling the room with energy that felt almost like generosity until you looked carefully at where it was directed and where it wasn't. He made a joke about Claire's driving. He made a joke about Claire's salary relative to his own. His parents laughed. Claire laughed. I watched her laugh, and I recognized by then the specific quality of her laughter in those moments. It had no breath in it. It was the sound of a woman practicing the performance of a feeling she did not have. The summer before the night everything broke open. Derek came to my house to help me fix a section of fence that had come down in a windstorm. He had offered to help. Claire had probably asked him to. We worked in the backyard together for most of a Saturday morning, and I appreciated the effort, genuinely, even if the help was more symbolic than practical. Derek did not know much about fences or about tools, and I ended up doing most of the work while he held things and talked. At one point he was telling me about a colleague who had tried to undercut him in a negotiation, and he said, "The thing is, Bobby, some people just don't have the instincts for this kind of work. You know? They look confident, but when things get real, they freeze." He paused, and then he glanced over at me with something that was not quite a smile. "No offense. I know you were in, landscaping, right? Different skill set entirely." He said it the way people say, "no offense," when they mean every ounce of it. He said it the way men say things to other men when they are trying to establish a hierarchy without the inconvenience of an argument. I was on my knees in the dirt, driving a post with a mallet. I stopped. I looked at him. I said, "None taken," and I went back to work. He expected more than that. I could feel it. He expected me to defend myself, or to fold a little, or to get flustered. He didn't know what to do with a man who offered him nothing to push against. It bothered him. I could see it bother him for the rest of the morning, the way a splinter bothers you, too small to deal with directly, too persistent to ignore. That afternoon, after Derek had gone home, I sat on my back porch with Hank and a glass of iced tea, and I let myself think the thing I'd been circling for nearly 2 years. Something was wrong in that house. Not the slow, ordinary wrongness of a difficult marriage. Two people who love each other imperfectly, who are learning each other in real time, who make mistakes and repair them. Something more deliberate than that. Something more patient. Derek was not a man having trouble controlling his temper. He was a man who had decided, quietly and carefully, that his wife's sense of herself belonged to him, that he could diminish it whenever he liked, in whatever increments he chose, and she would adapt. I did not yet know how right I was, and I did not yet know how much worse it was behind the closed doors, that no family dinner ever opened. I found out on a Sunday afternoon in late June, 3 months before the night of the fire. Claire had come over alone. She said she wanted to see Hank. She sat on the back porch with her coffee, and I sat across from her, and we talked about nothing for a while. The garden, a show she was watching, the weather. And then she went quiet. A specific kind of quiet. The kind that has weight to it. I waited. I have learned, over decades of dealing with people in their worst moments, that silence is often the most generous thing you can offer. "Dad," she said finally, not looking at me. "Yeah. Can I show you something?" She rolled up the sleeve of her linen shirt. Above her left elbow, just where the muscle meets the softer skin, there was a bruise. Yellow-green at the edges, which meant it was a week old at least. The shape of it was not the shape that bruises take when you walk into something or stumble. It was the shape of fingers. I looked at it for a long moment. I did not say anything. I did not trust myself to say anything. Not immediately, because there are things that can happen inside a person when they look at a bruise like that on their child's arm, things that are old and very hot. And I have been doing this long enough to know that the hottest things are rarely the most useful. "How long?" I said. She exhaled. It's not always like this." "How long, Claire?" She looked at her coffee cup. "About a year, since Lily was born. He gets scared, I think. He gets scared and he drinks, and when he drinks..." "Does he touch Lily?" "No." She said it fast, certain. "Never, I swear, never." I nodded. I believed her, and I stored the answer. "You need to leave," I said. "Dad, I'm not telling you how to live your life. I'm telling you what I know about situations like this. And I'm telling you that people who are scared and drink and do this," I gestured toward her arm, "they don't stop. They go further. Always." She started to cry, not dramatically, quietly, the way Claire has always cried, like she's embarrassed by it. I moved my chair next to hers and put my arm around her, and she leaned her head against my shoulder, and we sat there for a long time on the back porch with Hank asleep at our feet in the June afternoon heat. Before she left, she made me promise not to confront Derek. Not yet. She said she needed time to figure out a plan, a safe way to do it for Lily's sake. I promised, and I kept that promise, though keeping it cost me more than she knew. What I did instead was this. I told her about a signal. I reminded her of something we had set up between us years ago, when she was a teenager and Sandra and I used to worry about her going to parties, a code word she could text me that meant, "Come get me." No questions. The word was fishbowl, which we had chosen because it was specific enough that she would never use it by accident and unusual enough that nobody could guess it. I told her that code still stood. I told her to text it to me, or say it on the phone, if she was ever in danger and couldn't say so directly. She nodded. She hugged me at the door. She said, "I love you, Dad." She drove away in her silver Civic, and I stood in the driveway and watched her go, and I thought about the ways that love is sometimes the most helpless feeling in the world. 3 months passed. June became July, became August. Hot and dry as an argument. The kind of summer Collinsville gets every few years, where the air sits on you like a hand on your chest and doesn't move. I mowed lawns and serviced equipment and volunteered on Tuesdays and called Claire every few days and listened to her voice for evidence of the thing I was afraid of. She sounded fine. That was the word that kept presenting itself and that I kept refusing to trust. Fine. Then August 14th, a Tuesday. I had finished at the food pantry around 9, gotten home, walked Hank, gone to bed around 10:30. I was asleep by 11. At 2:14, my phone lit up the ceiling. It was a call from Claire's number. I grabbed it. I answered. I said her name. "Dad," she said, and her voice was, I have to find the right word for what her voice was, raw. Like something had been stripped away from it. Like all the practice and the performance and the careful management of how she sounded was gone, and what was left was just the essential signal. "Dad, the house... There's smoke, Dad. It started downstairs. Derek was... I don't know, he was smoking, or the stove or something, and Lily is upstairs and the staircase has smoke, and I can't..." And then I heard it behind her voice. Not just smoke, not just panic. I heard the specific quality of a house that is burning. A deep, almost structural sound, like the building is beginning to breathe differently. "Claire," I said. I was already putting shoes on. "Did you call 911? Derek, he's trying to get up the stairs, but there's so much..." "Fishbowl," I said. She went quiet for exactly 1 second. "Fishbowl," she said back. "Get out of the house. Go to the front yard. I'm coming." That code word. We had never had to use it in the years since I told her it still stood. Hearing it out loud, spoken into the hot August dark from either end of a phone call, felt the way very important things feel, simple and terrible, and completely real. I was outside and in the truck before we finished the call. I dialed 911 with my thumb as I backed out of the driveway. I told the dispatcher the address. I told her what I knew. 2-story residential structure, fire likely originating on the ground floor, 2 adults, 1 child, child on the 2nd floor, staircase potentially compromised. She asked me to stay on the line. I told her I was 3 minutes out and that I was a former fire captain with structural rescue experience. She asked me to wait for the department. I said, "I understand," and I hung up. I understood, and I drove. It was 11 minutes on a normal day. I did it in 6. I smelled the smoke before I turned onto Birchwood Drive. A thin, acrid thread of it in the air, gray-white in the beams of my headlights, and then I came around the corner and I saw the house. Ground floor windows orange. Not orange the way a lamp is orange. Orange the way fire is orange. The particular alive orange of something consuming. The front door was open. There was no one in the front yard. I left the truck in the middle of the street. I went to the back of the cab and grabbed what I carry. Not because I planned for this specific situation, but because I have carried it in trucks and work vehicles for 21 years out of professional habit. A short-handled axe, a folded emergency hood, a pair of work gloves with fire-resistant lining. Old habits don't retire when the career does. They just wait. Derek was at the front door, standing at the front door, pressed against the frame, one hand over his mouth. His face in the light from the fire was the color of wet cement. He was staring into the smoke like a man trying to understand a language he had never been taught. Claire came around the side of the house when she heard my truck. Her hair was loose and her eyes were streaming, and she grabbed my arm with both hands. "Lily is upstairs," she said. "Derek tried to get up the stairs, but there's too much smoke, and he—" I looked at Derek. He looked at me. In 4 years, I had never seen a particular expression on that man's face. The expression of a person who has run out of confidence in himself completely, who is standing at the edge of his own limitations, looking down. He had that expression now. It stripped away everything. The broad shoulders, the easy smile, the practiced ease of a man who believed he was the most capable person in any room. All of it gone in the light of his burning house. He said, "Bobby," in a voice I had never heard him use. "My daughter is up there." "Stay out here," I said. I pulled on the hood and the gloves. I wet the hood from the garden hose coiled at the side of the house. Muscle memory, the kind that skips the brain entirely and happens in the hands. And I went to the front door. Training doesn't leave you. Not the way people think it does. It goes deep, into the part of you that operates below thought, below fear, below even the specific awareness of what you're doing. What you learn in 21 years of structural firefighting is not just knowledge. It's a kind of physical grammar, a set of responses that your body learns to produce without asking permission. I knew the layout. I had been in that house dozens of times. I could map the staircase, the upper hallway, Lily's room, even in reduced visibility, even with smoke dropping the ceiling to chest height by the time I was past the foyer. The staircase was passable, just. The fire was heaviest in the kitchen and the living room to the back right, and the staircase ran up the left side of the house. Smoke was dense on the upper landing, but there was a narrow band of cleaner air close to the floor. I stayed low. I moved fast. Lily was in her room. She had gotten out of bed, which some children do in a fire. They wake up confused and frightened, and they move, which is sometimes life-saving, and sometimes the opposite depending on where they move. She had moved toward the window. She was crouched below the sill, her face in her hands, coughing, the thin, alarming cough of a small airway dealing with smoke inhalation. 3 years old, pale yellow walls, a wooden mobile of birds above the bed, turning slowly in the heat from the hallway. I said her name. She looked up. Her face. I will not describe her face in that moment in detail, because that image belongs to the part of my memory that is mine alone, and because any parent or grandparent listening to this knows already what it is. It is the face of a child who is frightened past the ability to cry, who has reached a place of stillness that a child should never reach. She said, "Pop, Pop." I said, "I've got you, sweetheart." I picked her up. I put her face against my shoulder and kept my hand on the back of her head, and I went back out the way I had come in, low, staying along the left wall, down the staircase, slower going down, the smoke thicker than a minute ago, the orange light from the back of the house brighter, through the foyer and out the front door. The fire department had arrived. 2 trucks, lights going, a crew already pulling hose. I walked out of the front door with Lily in my arms, and I felt the August night air hit us both and heard Claire's voice. Just her voice, not words, just a sound that had no name. I brought Lily to Claire. Claire sat down on the lawn and held her daughter and did not stand up for a long time. I crouched next to them. I put my hands on both of them. I said, "She's okay. She's breathing. She needs to be seen, but she's okay." Derek was standing 10 feet away. He was watching me. He had been watching me from the moment I came out the door. He did not look like himself. He looked like a man who was having a thought that would not stop arriving, a thought he kept trying to set down and kept picking back up. One of the firefighters came toward me, a young lieutenant I didn't recognize. Maplewood had cycled through a generation since my time. He looked at the hood, the gloves, the way I was standing. He said, "Sir, did you make entry on this structure?" "I did," I said. "Are you?" "Bobby Callahan, retired captain, Maplewood FD, badge 214. I had a child on the 2nd floor." He looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded with the specific respect that people who do a job give to other people who have done the same job. No ceremony, just a nod. "We've got the main body," he said. "The extension is going to come from the kitchen. She'll be out in 40 minutes. "Good," I said. I turned back to Claire and Lily. Derek had not moved. He was looking at me with an expression that I want to describe carefully, because it was not one expression. It was several, layered on top of each other like something complicated had been printed on the same page multiple times, and you could see all the layers at once. There was shock. There was gratitude. There was something that looked very much like shame. And underneath all of that, something smaller and harder to name. The particular discomfort of a man who has spent years deciding what another person is worth and has just been shown, in the most undeniable way possible, that he was wrong. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He tried again. Nothing came out. "Derek," I said. He looked at me. "Your daughter is okay." He nodded. His eyes filled. He sat down on the grass, and he put his face in his hands and his shoulders shook. I looked at Claire. She was looking at him with an expression I could not fully read. She held Lily tighter. She looked at me, and I looked at her. And between us passed the kind of communication that requires no words and never has, the specific frequency of a parent and child who know each other's silences by name. The paramedics came and took Lily and Claire for evaluation. I answered questions from the department, from the fire marshal's investigator who arrived around 3:30, from an officer with Maplewood PD who wanted a statement about what I'd seen and done. Through all of it, Derek sat on the curb. Occasionally, an emergency responder checked on him. He waved them off, gently. He was not injured. He was not in shock in the clinical sense. He was somewhere else entirely. Around 4 in the morning, after Lily had been cleared by the paramedics, smoke inhalation, mild, no lasting effects, she would need rest and monitoring, and Claire was sitting in the back of the ambulance with her. I went and sat down next to Derek on the curb. He didn't speak for a long time. We watched the firefighters work. The house was not destroyed. The damage was significant but structural, confined to the kitchen and the rear living room. It would need months of work, but it would stand. Finally, Derek said, "You were a firefighter." "For 21 years, I said. "Retired as a captain." He absorbed this. "You never said anything," he said. "You never asked," I said. That landed somewhere in him. I could see it. Not like a wound. More like a weight, something he would have to carry for a while before he understood its shape. "Bobby," he said. "Your daughter. What's been happening between me and Claire?" "I know," I said. He went quiet again. "I know about the bruise," I said. "I know about more than you think I know. And I know that tonight was not the first time Claire has been in a position where she needed someone to come through for her and you weren't able to. He didn't deny it. That was the thing that surprised me most about that moment. He didn't defend himself, didn't deflect, didn't reach for the easy excuses I had seen men reach for in moments like this. He just sat there and received it. And in receiving it, he looked smaller and more real than he had ever looked across any dinner table or any Saturday fence project. He said, "I know I've been..." And he stopped. And he said, "I don't know why I..." And he stopped again. And finally he said, just barely audible over the sound of the water and the radio traffic and the August night, "She deserves better than what I've been." I looked at the house. I thought about Sandra. I thought about 22 years of choosing someone over and over, in the small, unglamorous ways that don't make for good stories, the morning choices and the evening choices and the choices you make when you're tired and afraid and you could go either way. I said, "Yes, she does." The following weeks were not simple. Nothing about this kind of situation is ever simple, and I want to be honest about that because the version of this story where everything resolves cleanly after one dramatic night is not the true version. The true version is messier and longer and involves a lot of very ordinary, very difficult days. Claire and Lily stayed with me on Maple Court while the house on Birchwood Drive was being repaired. I set up the guest room for Claire and put a small air mattress in the corner for Lily, which Lily loved because she thought camping inside the house was the most exotic thing she had ever done. We had breakfast together every morning. Hank, who is old and patient and has the world's most accurate emotional compass, chose Lily almost immediately as his project, sleeping on her mattress at night, following her through the kitchen at a respectful beagle distance. It was, in the mornings especially, genuinely good. The particular hard-won goodness of people who have been through something and are still here. Claire filed for separation 3 weeks after the fire. She did it with the help of a family attorney named Margaret Sousa, a small, deliberate woman who had been practicing family law in Maplewood for 30 years, and who had, I came to understand during our first meeting in her office, seen everything and found her way to a quiet, very specific form of compassion through the seeing. She walked Claire through each step with patience and clarity. I sat in on those early meetings at Claire's request. I did not speak much. Mostly I listened and watched and occasionally handed Claire a tissue and, once, her water bottle when she reached for it and missed, her hands shaking. The process of gathering evidence for the divorce proceedings was its own kind of excavation. Claire had been keeping photographs on her phone, images she had taken privately, not knowing entirely why, not yet ready to name to herself what they documented. The bruise I had seen in June. 2 others at different points. A shattered cabinet door from an incident the previous winter that she had told people she walked into. Medical records from 2 separate urgent care visits in 14 months. Text messages that, read in sequence, traced the architecture of Derek's control over the preceding 3 years with a precision that was both damning and almost unbearable to look at. Margaret assembled all of it. She was meticulous, and she was kind, and she told Claire, in their 3rd meeting, what this documents is a pattern. Judges see patterns. We are going to be fine. Derek retained his own attorney, a man named Garrett Phillips, who I gather was formidable in other types of litigation, but who found himself, in this particular proceeding, on the wrong side of 3 years of documented evidence, and a client who, and I believe this matters, I believe it was real, did not actually want to fight. I had seen something in Derek on that curb at 4 a.m, in the dark and the smoke and the light of his own burning house, that I had not expected to see, the beginning of genuine recognition, not performance, not strategy, something quieter and more costly than either of those. The court date was a Thursday in October, a cool gray morning with the maples on the courthouse block at full color, the specific burning amber of Illinois in the fall that always makes me think of Sandra, who used to say that autumn was the season that knew how to be honest. Claire spoke first. She sat in that chair in front of the judge with her hands folded in her lap and her voice steady, and she told the truth. She told it plainly, without drama, without editorial. She described specific incidents, specific dates, specific injuries. Her voice broke once near the end when she talked about Lily, about making sure Lily would grow up understanding that this was not what love was supposed to look like, was not the template she should carry forward into her own life. It broke there, and she stopped, and she breathed, and she kept going. I was in the gallery. I kept my hands on my knees, and I kept my face still. When it was my turn to speak, I said what I had come to say. I described the June afternoon on my porch. I described the bruise. I described what Claire had told me and what I had observed across 4 years of family occasions. I described the night of the fire, not the rescue part, but what I'd seen of Derek at the front door, pressed against the frame, unable to act, while his daughter was on the second floor. And then I said something that I had been thinking about for weeks, something I wanted to get exactly right. I said, I am not here today because I hate my son-in-law. I am here because I love my daughter, and because the truth is the only thing that ever actually helps anyone in a situation like this. I don't hate Derek Nolan. I hate what he allowed himself to become inside the privacy of that house. Those are different things, and distinguishing between them is the only way any of us moves forward from here. The judge listened. She was a woman in her late 50s, silver-haired, with the specific economy of expression that people develop when they have spent decades watching people in their worst moments. She listened to Derek's attorney's presentation, which was brief and lacked conviction in a way that suggested Derek had given Garrett Phillips very little to work with. She reviewed the documentation Margaret had submitted. The divorce was granted, full physical custody of Lily to Claire, with supervised visitation for Derek pending his completion of a certified domestic violence intervention program and 6 months of verified sobriety. The ruling was read aloud in that cool October courtroom in a flat procedural voice that in no way matched the enormity of what it meant. Claire and I walked out together into the October morning. She stopped on the top step of the courthouse and breathed in the cold air and looked up at the maple trees for a long moment. Then she looked at me. I feel like I've been holding my breath for 3 years, she said. You don't have to anymore, I said. She took my arm and we walked to the car, and for the first time since the night of the fire, since before the fire, really, since a summer afternoon on a back porch when she rolled up her sleeve and showed me the thing she had been carrying alone, I felt something in my chest ease, not all at once, not dramatically, just a fraction, like a door that has been stuck for a long time giving slightly under a steady hand. The months after the divorce were a different kind of work. Not the emergency mode urgency of the preceding year, but the slow, patient work of building something back up from a compromised foundation. Claire found the apartment in Maplewood, a 2-bedroom on the second floor of a building called Orchard Place, on a street lined with old oak trees that she said reminded her of the street she grew up on. She painted Lily's room in that apartment pale yellow again. She didn't tell me she was going to do that. I saw it the first time I came to visit, and I had to stand in the doorway for a moment before I could say anything. The same shade, the same feeling of sunlight on a cloudy day. She was building her routine back. She returned to work at the rehabilitation center, and her patients, I was told by one of her colleagues, had noticed a change, a quality of presence she brought to the work now, a groundedness that made people trust her more quickly. She was sleeping. She was eating. She was laughing the real way, with breath in it. These things, incremental as they were everything. I was doing some building of my own. I had, over the years since Sandra died, allowed my world to contract in ways I hadn't fully registered while it was happening. I had my work, my Tuesday evenings at the pantry, my house, my dog. I had Claire and Lily, but the circle of actual human connection, the friends I used to have, the men I had served with at the department, the neighbors I used to sit with on summer evenings. That circle had tightened, quietly, year by year, grief doing what grief does when you don't address it directly. That fall, I called an old friend named Earl Dietrich, who had been on my crew for 12 years and who I had not spoken to in nearly 2. We met for coffee at a diner on State Street and sat there for 3 hours. He told me I looked different. I asked him how. He thought about it for a moment and then said, lighter, like something got lifted off you. I thought about that for a long time afterward. He wasn't wrong. I started going to a Thursday night gathering at the Maplewood VFW Hall. Not veterans. I hadn't served in the military, though my father had. But an informal group that included retired first responders, former tradesmen, a couple of teachers, people who had done things with their hands and their bodies for a long time and were navigating what came after. I played cards. I drank bad coffee. I told stories and listened to stories. It was, in its quiet way, one of the best things I did in the year after the fire. I don't think I fully understood until that Thursday night group how much I had missed simply being in a room with people who laughed easily and didn't require explanation. One Saturday in early December, Lily asked me about the fire. She was sitting at my kitchen table drawing in a sketchbook Claire had given her, a project she had recently become devoted to. She was drawing what appeared to be Hank, though Hank, in her interpretation, had approximately 3 times as many spots as the actual Hank and considerably more expressive eyebrows. She asked the question without looking up from the drawing, in the way children ask the things they have been thinking about for a while, casually, as though the question had just occurred to them, when in fact it has been sitting in them like a stone in water for some time. "Pop, she said. "Why did you come inside the house when it was on fire?" "Because you were in there," I said. She considered this. She added a spot to sketchbook Hank. "Were you scared?" she asked. "A little bit," I said. "But you came anyway." "That's usually what scared means," I said. "It means you know something is dangerous. It doesn't mean you stop." She looked up from the drawing. She has Claire's eyes, the gray-green of Lake Michigan in autumn. "That's brave," she said, with the full and uncomplicated conviction that 4-year-olds bring to moral assessments. "No," I said. "That's just love." She nodded and went back to her drawing, satisfied with this answer in the way that children are satisfied when an adult says something that matches what they already knew. I sat across from her and drank my coffee and looked at my kitchen, the familiar objects of my ordinary life, the photographs on the refrigerator, the hook by the back door where Hank's leash hangs, the window above the sink where the oak tree in the backyard is visible, bare now in December, its branches against the gray sky like the lines of a map. February brought something none of us had expected. A letter. It came addressed to Claire, at her new apartment on Orchard Place, but she brought it to my house because she wasn't sure she wanted to open it alone. She sat at my kitchen table with it in her hands, the envelope unopened, and looked at it for a long moment. It was from Derek. Handwritten on plain white paper, no letterhead, the handwriting I recognized from years of seeing it on birthday cards and shopping lists on the refrigerator at Birchwood Drive. She asked me if she should read it. I said that was entirely her decision, and that I would be here whatever she decided. She opened it. I didn't read it. She read it herself, and when she was finished, she set it on the table and sat quietly for a moment. Then she told me, in summary, what it said. Derek had enrolled in the intervention program as required by the court. He had also, voluntarily, entered an inpatient alcohol treatment program for 30 days in the fall and had been attending AA meetings since then. He had started seeing a therapist. He was living in a rented apartment on the east side of Maplewood. He wrote that he was not writing to ask for anything, not to reopen anything or to contest the custody arrangement. He wrote that he wanted Claire to know that he understood finally what he had done, not as an abstract acknowledgement, but in its specific dimensions, the specific damage of it. He wrote that he was sorry in a way that recognized the word was insufficient. He wrote that he hoped Lily would grow up knowing she was loved by both of her parents, even if one of them had not known how to love correctly for a long time. Near the end of the letter, he had written about the fire, about standing at the front door, unable to go in, about watching me come out of the house with Lily and understanding, in that moment, what it looked like when a person chose someone else completely, without calculation, without hesitation, without keeping anything back for themselves. He wrote that he had spent 4 years believing that strength was about control, that he had been wrong about that in every possible way, that, watching a quiet man he had underestimated walk into a burning house and walk out carrying his daughter had rearranged something in him at a level he was still working to understand. Claire folded the letter and held it in her hands for a long time. "I don't know what to do with this," she said. "You don't have to do anything with it," I said. "Not right now. Maybe not ever, in the sense of having a definitive response to it. Sometimes people say true things and that's what it is, a true thing they needed to say. You're allowed to receive it without knowing what it means for the future." "Do you believe him?" she asked. "That he means it?" I thought about it honestly. I thought about Derek on the curb at 4 a.m, his shoulders shaking, his face in his hands. I thought about what it takes to write a letter like that, handwritten, no attorney's signature at the bottom, no strategy apparent in it. I thought about the specific difficulty of recognizing yourself clearly and then committing to that recognition on paper and sending it to the person you hurt. I think he's trying, I said, whether that's the same as meaning it is something only time will show. And that's his work to do, not yours. She nodded. She put the letter in her bag. We had dinner. Lily came out of the living room to show us another drawing, this time a house with a yellow door and a garden and what appeared to be a small, extremely rotund Hank in the yard, and she explained each element of the drawing with the detailed and serious narration that 4-year-olds bring to their own artwork, as though they are showing you something you could not possibly understand without guidance. We listened carefully. We gave it the attention it deserved. That evening, after Claire and Lily had gone home, I sat on the back porch in the February cold with my coat on and a cup of coffee going cold in my hands, and I thought about the year that had passed. The fire, the mornings in my guest room with Claire and Lily, the smell of breakfast filling the house again for the first time in years, the courthouse steps in October, the Thursday nights at the VFW hall, the letter on the kitchen table, the drawing of the house with the yellow door. I thought about Sandra. I thought about what she would say if she were sitting in the chair across from me, the way she used to sit on this porch in the evenings, her feet tucked under her, a cup of tea in both hands. She would say something clear and direct and slightly impatient with sentimentality. She would probably say, "Well, you handled it." And I would say, "Did I?" And she would give me the look she gave when she thought I was being deliberately obtuse. And she would say, "You walked into a burning house and brought your granddaughter out." I'd say that qualifies. But that's not all of it. That's not what this year was really about. And I think Sandra would know that. The fire, the physical event of it, was one night. What it was about was longer than one night. It was about seeing something in your child's life that is wrong and learning how to be useful to her without taking the story away from her. About not moving too fast or too slow, not out of calculation, but out of love, which sometimes means waiting, and sometimes means driving through the night without hesitation, and sometimes means sitting on a curb in the dark and saying the plain truth to a man who is just beginning to hear it. It was about understanding that the underestimated people, the quiet ones, the ones who mow your lawn and sort canned goods on Tuesday nights and don't volunteer their resumes at dinner parties, are not empty. They are full of things that don't need an audience. They are carrying years of experience and discipline and love that they never stopped having just because nobody was watching. And it was about learning, in my 63rd year, to let people back in, to let the circle widen again, to let mornings mean something again. Strength isn't winning fights. I have known that for a long time. Strength is answering the phone when somebody is afraid. Strength is keeping a promise you made to someone on a back porch in June, even when keeping it is the hardest thing you've done in years. Strength is the calm you maintain, not because nothing scares you, but because you have learned that panic is expensive and costs people around you more than it costs you. Strength is walking back into a burning building for the 42nd time, even when the building is not a structure, even when it's a marriage, a family, a life that is caught on fire in the middle of the night and needs someone to go in. I painted Claire's apartment porch railing in April. She had asked if I could find time for it, and I cleared the whole Saturday. Lily helped. She wore a plastic apron over her clothes, and she had her own small brush, and she painted approximately 6 inches of railing with tremendous seriousness before getting bored and switching to drawing on the paper bags we'd laid down as drop cloth. Claire brought out sandwiches around noon, and we sat on the unfinished porch in the April sun and ate together, the 3 of us. And Hank walked in a slow, investigative circle around the perimeter of the porch, nose down, assessing everything with the gravity that beagles bring to all things. Claire said, "This is nice." Lily said, "We should do this every day." I said, "Painting porches every day might be ambitious." Lily said, "Not painting. This." And she gestured vaguely at the 3 of us, at the sandwiches, at the sun, at Hank conducting his investigations. The particular gesture of a child who does not yet have the word she means, but understands the thing completely. I looked at my daughter, who had Sandra's eyes and my stubbornness, and more courage than either of us, and I thought, yes, this, whatever word you want to put on it, this is what you go through all of it for. The railing came out beautifully, white, fresh, clean. I finished it around 3 in the afternoon and stood back and looked at it in the spring light and felt the simple satisfaction of a thing done well. The same satisfaction I have felt every time I have done a job that needed doing. It doesn't change, that feeling. It doesn't care whether the job is a fence post or a railing or a burning staircase in a house on Birchwood Drive. It is the quiet knowledge that you showed up and you were useful, and the thing is better now than it was before. That is enough. In my experience, that is almost always enough. So I want to say this to you, wherever you are, to whoever has been listening to this with me until now. This story is mine, but the things at the center of it, the fear for someone you love, the longing to be useful, the long work of rebuilding what damage has unmade, the question of what strength really is and what it really costs, those are not mine alone. I have read your comments on these videos. Comments on, I know how many of you are living through versions of what Claire lived through, or versions of what I lived through watching her, or versions of something I haven't even named yet that you're carrying without anyone around you knowing the weight of it. If you're in a situation where something is wrong, where someone's shoulders do that small, specific drop when a word lands on them, trust what you're seeing. Trust it early. You don't have to act dramatically. You don't have to have a plan. You just have to stay awake to it and stay present for the person it's happening to, and be ready when the moment comes to drive through the night without hesitation. And if this story found something in you, if it landed somewhere specific, somewhere you recognize, please leave a like on this video. It takes 2 seconds and it tells me something important. That this reached you, that it mattered, that the hour you spent here was worth it. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because I will keep telling these stories, the honest ones, the ones that don't end perfectly, but end truly, for as long as there are people who need to hear them. And leave me a comment. Tell me what this brought up for you. Tell me your own version of it. Tell me about the person you drove through the night for, or the person who drove through the night for you, because I promise you I will read it, every word of it, and it will matter to me. My name is Robert Callahan. I am 63 years old. I live alone in a house in Collinsville, Illinois, with a 9-year-old beagle who hogs the foot of the bed, and on Saturday mornings in April I paint porch railings for my daughter, and on Tuesday evenings I sort canned goods at St. Augustine, and on Thursday nights I drink bad coffee with people who have done hard things and know how to laugh about it. And 11 minutes from where I sleep, on a street lined with oak trees, my daughter and my granddaughter are living in an apartment with pale yellow walls in one room because Claire decided that some things were worth keeping. Some things are worth painting back into existence, back into the color of sunlight, even after everything. That's the truest thing I know how to leave you with. Quiet people are not empty people. Love is not a feeling. It's a decision you make over and over, in the small ordinary moments, in the middle of the night, in the smoke. And the person who has always been there for you, the one you stopped really seeing years ago, the one who mows the lawn and never talks about himself and shows up with a folded hood and fire-resistant gloves at 2:14 in the morning, that person is not nothing. That person is everything. Take care of each other. I mean that from the bottom of whatever I have left.